Hello friends, I am Chevy. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your old house, things where you are? I hope everything is well, and I hope that if you live in the Gulf Coast, you are going to be safe because it's looking very, very dangerous down there. And I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit because one of the things that I've mentioned before, but I've never really discussed it at depth, is the safety and security that I have living in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. For those of you who don't know, I live in West Virginia. North central West Virginia. So where I live is hilly. I wouldn't call it mountains. There's very few actual, what I would say are mountains in West Virginia. We technically live on the Appalachian Mountain Range, but it's kind of more of a large hill range, a very large hill range. So we have very large hills here, but the reason I'm going over that is because tonight I had to take Monster to soccer practice, middle school soccer. And they start in 2 weeks, and they have to get in 14 practices before their first game. And their first game is the first day of school. They have a game that night. So they have to get practices in. So we're driving to practice, and it was like we were directly under this storm front that's rolling through right now. And it's a big storm front. So we're riding the line, like the line was going straight out from where I was sitting, where the storm front was meeting the cold front, or the storm was the cold front. I don't know how all that works, but what I know is when you look at it, it looks super dangerous, right? And that's the norm that I grew up with here. I grew up with these big, huge, dangerous storms, and my whole childhood, I can remember laying awake at night for hours waiting for the storm to stop, and I mean that, like hours. And these storms all come from the Midwest. All of our weather comes across the United States from west to east. Not always. There are times when the northern winds can bring something down and it can kind of hook to the west. But for the most part, storms like this come from the west, 90% of the time. And they can last for hours. Whereas if you've ever seen like the tornado videos or those big storms in the Midwest, go very quickly. And part of that reason is I live in the quote-unquote mountains, and it stops the storm. All the updraft, all of that turbulence that exists over our mountains holds the storms. And so the storms have a chance to kind of stagnate here and die out before they get, before they become, they don't get a chance to turn into supercells and drop tornadoes. And so I think in my 40 years living here, I'm 41, I didn't live here for 4 years while I was in the Marines, but my 40 years of experience in the state, 41 years, I think maybe there's been like 3 confirmed tornadoes in my area, and they did very little damage, very, very little damage. We have wind gusts, or they call them, there's some burst name for it, but for the most part, we don't have weather disasters. There's no, hurricanes don't reach this far inland, and tornadoes don't happen here because there's these mountain ranges, and these mountain ranges slow storms down and don't let them get to turn into these big violent things. They're just these slow, crawly things, and so storms here last for hours. And when I was stationed in Hawaii, when I was in the Marines, I lived in Hawaii for a little over 3 years, like 3.5 years. And storms there last minutes. And I'm not joking when I say that. Like, that was one of the things that really struck me about that island is how fast the clouds are. They just fly by. Whereas here, they just lazily creep on through. They're just taking their sweet time getting east of here before they hit the sea and take off. But there's this, where this ridge line is, everything just kind of slows down. And that can cause flooding. Sure, if a rainstorm gets big enough and it's holding enough moisture, it can sit on top of my state long enough to cause the valleys to flood. But we live in high elevations, so very rarely, unless you live along one of the major rivers, does that affect a large population. And it's one of those things that makes me feel really comfortable about living here. Yes, sometimes in the winter it can get, we can get some deep snow because of the storm, because of the storm slowing down and just sitting here and dropping tons of snow. In my area, it's not that bad. If you go just east of me into like Preston County, Davis and Elkins down in that way, like, yeah, they can get lots of feet of snow, like, huge snow banks and stuff. But where I'm at, I think the worst I ever saw was maybe 3 feet of snow in my entire life. And for the most part, our winters are mild, especially the last decade or maybe even the last 20 years. We've had not very much at all for winter. I don't think last year we had our roads scraped even once. Like, there was just no winter. But so we don't get blizzards, we don't get tornadoes, we don't get hurricanes, we don't get, it's geographically a really wonderful spot. The downside is, one of those nice things about the wind moving super fast is it carries humidity with it. And when it doesn't move fast, humidity stagnates. And the humidity here can be overwhelming. It can be very, very, very overwhelming. In the summertime, here, when it's 90 degrees and the humidity is at 80%, it can be just stiflingly hot and make you just feel horrific. But there's some security here. There's no financial security here. There's no jobs. Housing is extremely cheap if you want to try to move here. But there is some personal safety and security that goes on here. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about. It's one of the charms, I think. One of the things that people don't really think about when they want to move to an area is, what are the potential risks? We don't have wildfires. We don't have earthquakes. We don't have, we don't have these things that exist in larger populated areas. And we don't have tornadoes that exist in sparsely populated areas. It's an interesting place. I recommend it to everybody. So if you're in the path of these tornadoes, if you're in the path of the fires, if the world is around you is literally going to hell, I feel for you, and I hope that you remain safe and stay positive through all of this, because in the end, I think that humanity will come together and make it okay. And that's what we've been trying to do for the last 6 months. So, thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really do appreciate you. And I will see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is carouse. It is a verb meaning to engage in boisterous social activity. We caroused until dawn at the annual New Year's Eve party that the Weathertons hold on their yacht. Carouse, C-A-R-O-U-S-E.